The DeWalt drill slipped in my hand. Sweat, not incompetence, though Marian would have said otherwise when we were married. I was reinforcing the dock posts at Gaspard's Landing, my family's camp deep in the Atchafalaya, when I heard the fanboat. Wrong pitch for the park service. Too aggressive for tourists. I keep tools organized. Always have. Dad taught me that before he taught me which cypress knees hide gator nests, which channels stay deep year-round. A man who can't find his 9/16 socket in the dark, he'd say, can't find his way home in fog neither. Been proved right more times than I care to admit. Especially that custody hearing where Marianne's lawyer made my night fishing sound like criminal negligence. Wasn't criminal. Wasn't exactly legal either, but that's different. The boat came around the bend too fast, some Coast Guard Zodiac with CDC markings. I recognized the woman standing in the bow before I wanted to. Dr. Marian Gaspard. Kept my name even after she got the hell out of Atchafalaya Parish. Said it looked good on grant applications. I said some things I shouldn't have about that. Luke. She didn't yell it. Marian never yells. She projects. I need a guide. Bayou Teche Tours is in Morgan City, I said, going back to my drill. They take Discover card. There's an outbreak. She jumped onto my dock without asking. Still moved like she owned every piece of ground she touched. Hemorrhagic fever. Mosquito-borne. I need someone who knows the deep swamp. I kept drilling. The post was rotted through from last year's flooding. Same flooding that destroyed the Thibodeau place and the old Gautreaux fishing shack. Climate change, Marianne would say. Bad luck and the Corps of Engineers playing God with the levees, I'd say. We'd had that argument too. You need me because the Park Service won't take you off trail. I set down the drill. Whatever you're chasing is in the closed sections. It's in your family's hunting grounds. She pulled out a tablet I couldn't afford on my boat repair income and part-time fish guiding. Showed me a heat map of infection vectors. Purple clusters blooming across places I'd been setting traps since I was 12. Places I definitely wasn't supposed to be trapping. Those coordinates are wrong, I lied. They're from your daughter's science project. Marianne's voice went soft, which meant she was furious. Emma did a population study of bald cypress for her AP Environmental. Uploaded GPS data to iNaturalist. The infection cluster perfectly overlaps her survey points. My daughter, our daughter technically, though I got her every other weekend and Wednesdays until that thing with the truancy officer. Emma's living in Baton Rouge now with Marianne's new husband, the petroleum engineer with the Tulane degree and the Lexus that doesn't have dried fish blood in the seats. Emma came out here? The dock post could wait. When? Last spring. You signed the permission slip. I had thought it was some field trip to the interpretive center in Morgan City, not my girl wading through stump fields where cottonmouths sun themselves on floating logs. I felt something cold that wasn't the December air coming off the bayou. Show me the heat map again. The purple clusters, that's what CDC calls concentration of cases, Marian explained like I'm stupid instead of just less educated, centered on Petit Lac, the Oxbow Lake where my great-grandfather built the original Gaspard camp in the 30s. Before the basin became federal refuge. Before the Park Service and their rules about native species and breeding grounds. Before my family became outlaws on our own land. How many infected? I asked. 43 confirmed. Another 160 showing symptoms. She locked the tablet. It's spreading through Port Bar, up toward Krotz Springs. The mosquitoes are, Luke, they're not normal. They're big. They swarm. And the virus has a 96-hour incubation with 70% mortality. 70%. I'm not good with statistics, but I'm good with percentages. That's worse than stopping one gator in 10 during season. I need samples, Marianne continued. The Army Corps is planning to breach the East Levee, flood the whole basin. They think drowning the breeding grounds will stop the spread. That'll destroy everything. The words came out harder than I meant. Every camp, Every access point, every illegal trap line and unlicensed hunting stand, yes. She looked at me the way she did during marriage counseling right before she stopped going. Luke, if we don't find the source, they'll flood it anyway. But if I can isolate the pathogen, maybe develop a pesticide that's species-specific, we can save some of the basin. I looked past her at the Zodiac, government boat, CDC funding, the kind of resources that made my welded aluminum John boat look like a floating beer cooler, which is basically what it was before I fixed it up. But she needed me, needed what I knew about water levels and shortcut channels, and which cypress stands had dry platforms 12 feet up where you could sleep without gators investigating. Needed the knowledge you don't get from graduate school, even the good ones. When's the Corps planning to breach? I asked. 72 hours. Less if more people die. Something splashed in the shallows. Probably a gar rolling. Or a gator. Hard to tell this time of day, and I was distracted. Emma's sample points. Purple clusters. 70% mortality. I'll take you, I said, but we use my boat. That Zodiac sounds like an airboat collision. Every gator in 3 parishes will hear us coming. I need to transport equipment. We'll make multiple trips. I was already planning the route. Or we go now, you see what we're dealing with, then we plan properly. You still rush into things. And you still stall until circumstances force decisions. But she was climbing into my John boat. Some things don't change. I started the engine. A 25-horse Mercury that needed new spark plugs but ran quiet enough. The drill sat on the dock, the post half-fixed. I get back to it. Maybe, depending on whether the Corps drowned the whole basin first, drowned my family's history, drowned the places Emma walked last spring collecting data for a school project. We headed south into the swamp as the sun started dropping. I knew these channels in full dark, but sunset was trickier. Shadows moved wrong. You couldn't tell if that log was deadwood or a bull gator waiting. Your daughter's smart, Marion said as we passed under a fallen cypress. She noticed the mosquitoes were larger than standard Aedes aegypti. Put it in her field notes. She notice anything else? My voice sounded strange. Pride and guilt mixing. I taught Emma to check her surroundings. Watch for animal signs. Didn't teach her to fear mosquitoes bigger than they should be. She mentioned they moved in formation. Said it looked like, I'm quoting here, like those videos of starlings murmuring, but bugs. That wasn't right. Mosquitoes don't school. They disperse, follow CO2 and heat signatures individually. I've spent enough nights in these swamps slapping at the clouds of them to know. How much bigger? I asked. 30% increase in body mass. Proboscis length suggests unusual development. Luke, this isn't natural mutation. Something's driving rapid evolution. The channel narrowed. I killed the engine. Let momentum carry us into the shade of a massive Tupelo. Ahead, the water opened into Petit Lac. The old Gaspard camp stood on stilts at the far end, weathered wood gray as gator hide. And between us and the camp, hanging over the water like low cloud, was something that made my hands tighten on the outboard. A veil of mosquitoes, thousands, maybe millions, moving together in a shifting curtain of wings and bodies. They weren't dispersing. They weren't hunting individually. They were waiting. Jesus Christ, Marion whispered. Luke, we need to. The veil shifted, oriented toward us. I'd seen schools of mullet move that way, every fish turning as one. Seen flocks of blackbirds twist through sunset sky in unison. Never seen insects do it. Never wanted to see insects do it. I yanked the starter cord. The Mercury coughed, caught, roared to life louder than I wanted. But loud was better than staying here watching that living curtain flow toward us like smoke with purpose. We ran for the channel entrance, and behind us the veil pursued, condensing into a moving column that looked too much like something reaching, something trying to grab. Something that knew we were here. We made it back to the landing before sunset barely. I tied off the John boat with hands that hadn't shaken like this since the night Emma was born. When they let me hold her for exactly 4 minutes before the nurse said Marian needed skin-to-skin bonding. I counted those minutes. 240 seconds of knowing I was responsible for something more fragile than anything I'd ever fixed with drill and solder. Marianne was on her satellite phone, speaking too fast in words I half understood. Use social behavior, unprecedented aggregation density, need entomology team from Tulane. They won't come, I said, pulling the bait cooler onto the dock. Not if you tell them what we saw. She lowered the phone. The scientific community requires evidence. The scientific community doesn't believe in monsters. I opened the cooler, grabbed 2 Abitas I'd been saving, handed her one. You saw what I saw. She took the beer but didn't open it. What I saw was a dense mosquito swarm exhibiting coordinated movement patterns. Unusual, yes. Unprecedented in Culicity species, certainly. But calling it a monster. It hunted us, Marianne. The words hung there between us like the humidity that never quite leaves the bayou, even in December. She opened the beer, drank half in one go. That's when I knew she was scared too. I need samples, she said finally. Live specimens, if possible. And I need to access Emma's original collection points. Those coordinates put you right under that veil. Then we approach from a different angle. She pulled out her tablet again, fingers moving across the screen with the confidence of someone who trusted technology more than instinct. According to USGS topography, there's a channel network feeding into Petit Lac from the north, old logging cuts from the 20s. I knew those channels, used them for running traps when the Park Service did flyovers. They were narrow, overgrown, and they flooded unpredictably when the Atchafalaya rose. Those channels are closed, I said. Corps of Engineers put barriers up after Hurricane Gustav. Then we portage around the barriers. With your equipment? In December water. I shook my head. You'll need a different boat. Something that can draft shallow and carry weight. I have a Zodiac. You have a bathtub with an outboard that announces our position to everything with ears. I'm talking about a real swamp boat. I pulled out my phone, started scrolling contacts. Bobby Thibodeau has a mud motor rig. $1,500 and he doesn't ask questions. I don't have $1,500 in discretionary funds. Then CDC better find it because we're not getting samples in that John boat. I hit Bobby's number. And you're gonna need more than sample bottles. You'll need containment equipment, the kind they use for hot zone operations. She stared at me. How do you know about hot zone protocols? Discovery Channel. I'm not stupid, just poor. There's a difference. Bobby's phone rang 4 times before going to voicemail. Thibodeau Marine Repair. Leave a message unless you're calling about that redfish tournament purse. In which case I got witnesses says that fish was legal. And I explained what I needed without explaining why. Bobby would charge extra for the why. Marianne was making her own calls, speaking in that clipped professional voice she used with grant administrators and, toward the end of our marriage, with me. I caught phrases, BSL, 3 equivalent, portable containment, authorization from Atlanta. The sun had dropped below the Cypress line now, turning the bayou into bands of orange and black. This was the time of day Dad called the changing hour, when diurnal animals bedded down and nocturnal predators stirred. When the swamp revealed its true nature if you knew how to look. I looked south toward Petit Lac. Couldn't see the veil from here, but I could feel it. Like pressure before a storm, that sense of something building. Luke. Marianne had finished her calls. There's something I didn't tell you. Here it comes, I thought. The part where she explains this is worse than she said. The victims aren't just getting sick. She set down her beer, wrapped her arms around herself despite the 70-degree evening. They're exhibiting behavioral changes, becoming aggressive, attacking family members. 3 patients had to be restrained. Like rabies. Superficially similar, but rabies has a long incubation period and causes hydrophobia. This is different. The infected become obsessed with water. They try to return to the bayou. 2 patients escaped hospitals in Opelousas and were found waiting in irrigation ditches. I thought about that curtain of mosquitoes, the way it moved with purpose. You think the virus is controlling them. I think the virus is adapted to encourage vector transmission. Make the host return to mosquito breeding grounds, maximize exposure to feeding adults. She looked at me with something I hadn't seen since the night Emma fell out of the oak tree and broke her arm. Fear mixed with the kind of determination that overrides survival instinct. Luke, if this pathogen spreads beyond the basin, if it reaches Baton Rouge, Lafayette. She didn't finish. Didn't need to. Louisiana wasn't built for quarantine. Too much water, too many channels connecting everything to everything else. How long until the Corps breaches the levee? I asked. 68 hours. They're already moving equipment into position. And if they flood the basin? It might drown the breeding grounds, or it might just spread contaminated water into the Atchafalaya River system. We don't know if the larvae can survive in high-flow conditions. My phone rang. Bobby Thibodeau returning my call. I stepped away from Marianne, explained what I needed, listened to Bobby explain why that would cost more than $1,500. $2,000, I told Marianne when I came back, and he wants it tonight. Cash. The CDC doesn't work in cash. Then we don't work in Bobby's boat. I finished my beer, tossed the bottle in the recycling bin Marianne made me install back when she thought she could civilize my camp. I've got $800 in the safe. You cover 12. Bobby delivers the boat tomorrow morning. She did math in her head the way she always did, her telltale nose wrinkle appearing. That's most of my emergency fund. Yeah, well, this seems pretty fucking emergency. The profanity slipped out. I don't curse around Marianne. Didn't when we were married. It was one of her things, her boundaries. The kind of boundary that made sense in faculty lounges, but not in swamps where sometimes the only appropriate response to an 8-foot gator is, "Holy shit, look at that bastard." But she didn't correct me, just nodded, pulled out her phone, started making arrangements. While she coordinated with Bobby, I walked to the camp's equipment shed and started pulling gear. Waders, life vests, first aid kit that probably needed updating but better than nothing, a machete for cutting through deadfalls, 2 flashlights with fresh batteries, plus the rechargeable LED lantern Emma bought me for Father's Day 3 years ago. It still worked, which was more than I could say for most of what she gave me. The shed smelled like motor oil and mildew, familiar smells that usually brought comfort. Tonight, they just reminded me how much I had to lose. The Corps floods the basin, this camp goes underwater. My grandfather's handiwork, my father's workshop, every repair I'd made to hold it together through hurricanes and floods, and the slow rot of being officially unwelcome on land my family worked for generations. Luke, Marian stood in the shed doorway. Bobby says he'll deliver the boat at dawn. I authorized the payment. Good. And I called Emma, told her we were doing field work together. She paused. She was excited, said it was like old times. Old times. Before the arguments about money and future plans. Before I missed that parent-teacher conference because a charter client's transmission died 40 miles downriver. Before she decided the bayou was a dead end and I was too stubborn to see it. What did you tell her about the outbreak? I asked. Nothing. She doesn't need that worry. Marian stepped into the shed, looked around at the organized chaos of my repair supplies. You kept the drill press. It was your father's. Felt wrong to sell it. She ran her hand along the workbench, fingers tracing the dents and burns from decades of marine repair. Her father taught me to weld in this shed, taught me to true a prop and time an outboard and splice braided line, told me I'd always have work if I had skills. Didn't tell me skills alone don't save marriages when your wife wants a life that isn't scheduled around fish migration and hunting seasons. I should have asked about the camp, she said quietly, when I filed the divorce. Should have made sure you kept it in the settlement. You gave it to me, put it in the papers. I gave you an illegal structure on federal land that you can't insure, can't mortgage, and might lose any day the Park Service decides to enforce the law. She turned to face me. I gave you a liability because I knew you'd fight for it anyway. It's my family's place. It's a shack on stilts, Luke. It's home. The word came out sharper than I intended. Marian flinched just slightly, and I felt that familiar guilt. The sense that I was failing some test I didn't know I was taking. If we stop this outbreak, she said, if I can develop a targeted solution, maybe the Corps won't flood the basin. And if you can't? She didn't answer, didn't need to. We both knew what happened when the government decided land was disposable. Something splashed outside. Close, too close. I grabbed the machete and flashlight, pushed past Marianne, swept the light across the landing. Mosquitoes, hundreds of them, rising from the water in small clouds. Not the massive veil we'd seen at Petit Lac, but enough to make my skin crawl. They weren't biting, just hovering, watching if mosquitoes could watch. Inside, I said, now. We retreated to the camp's main room. I locked the door, checked the screens on every window. They were intact, but screens meant for casual bugs, not the kind of determined assault I was imagining. Marian set up her equipment on the table, laptop, portable analyzer, sample containers that looked like they belonged in a sci-fi movie. Professional scientist mode, the version of her that could dissect a problem without emotion. I need to ask you something, she said without looking up from her laptop. When Emma was here last spring, did she mention seeing anything unusual, beyond the mosquitoes? She never told me she was here. Remember? I signed a form. Thought she was at Morgan City. Right? She typed something, frowned at the screen. The thing is, her field notes mention abandoned equipment at one of the sample sites. Specifically, at the old platform near Gator Point. Gator Point, the hunting stand my grandfather built in the tallest cypress at the south end of Petit Lac. I hadn't been there in 2 years. Not since the Park Service helicopter spotted my boat and I had to spend 3 hours hiding in the deadfall while they searched. What kind of equipment? I asked. She didn't specify, just noted scientific instruments, non-standard, in her observations. Marian finally looked at me. Luke, what if someone was already studying the mosquitoes? What if this isn't natural mutation? The idea settled in my chest like cold lead. Bad enough thinking nature evolved a nightmare. Worse thinking someone might have engineered it. Who would do that? I asked. And why here? The basin is isolated. Minimal human population. Rich ecosystem for testing vector dynamics. She pulled up something on her screen, satellite imagery showing the network of channels and lakes. If you wanted to study mosquito-borne pathogen transmission in a controlled environment, this would be ideal. Controlled environment with 43 dead people. Maybe it wasn't supposed to spread to humans. Maybe it was designed for animal vectors, and something went wrong. She zoomed in on Gator Point. We need to check that platform. Outside, the mosquitoes had stopped hovering. Through the window, I watched them settle back onto the water's surface, wings folding in unison like synchronized swimmers. We go at first light, I said. Bobby brings the boat. We load your gear. We hit Gator Point before the veil wakes up. You think it sleeps? Everything sleeps. even monsters. I turned off the lights, leaving just the LED lantern. Get some rest. Tomorrow's gonna be a long day. Luke, her voice came from the darkness. Thank you for doing this. You didn't give me much choice. I could have gotten another guide, someone licensed. Licensed guides stay on marked trails. You needed someone who knows the swamp the way it really is, not the way the Park Service wants tourists to think it is. I sat down on the cot that served as my bed when I stayed overnight. Besides, Emma walked here. If there's something dangerous at Gator Point, I need to know she wasn't exposed. Marian didn't respond, but I heard her settling into the other cot, the one I kept for the rare occasions Emma stayed over. The springs creaked the same way they had when she was 10 and afraid of thunderstorms, when I tell her stories about Grandpere and the black bear he tracked for 3 days, or the flood of 27 when the whole basin became an inland sea. Stories that made the swamp seem manageable, like something you could understand if you just learned the rules. Tonight, I wasn't sure there were rules anymore. Outside, the bayou made its normal sounds. Frogs, night birds, the occasional splash of fish breaking surface. But underneath, I felt that pressure building, like the swamp itself was holding its breath. Waiting for dawn. Waiting for us to come back. Bobby Thibodeau delivered the mud motor rig at 5:47 a.m., which for Bobby meant he'd actually left his dock on time. The boat was better than I expected. 18 feet of welded aluminum with a raised platform and a 35-horse Go Devil that could push through water so shallow you could read the bottom. The kind of rig that made the Park Service nervous because it went places boats weren't supposed to go. "She'll draft in 4 inches if you lean back," Bobby said, accepting Marianne's cash without counting it. Trust wasn't Bobby's strong suit, but apparently CDC money spent same as anyone's. Engine's got a crack in the mounting bracket. Don't run her full throttle more than 10 minutes straight or the bracket'll snap and you'll be swimming. "When were you planning to mention the crack?" Marian asked. "Just did." Bobby grinned, showing the gap where a dock cleat caught him during Hurricane Ike. "You want guarantees? Rent from Enterprise." He left in his truck before Marian could argue. Smart man. She was staring at the boat like it had personally insulted her. "It's fine," I said, loading her equipment. "Bobby's stuff always works, just not the way you'd expect." That's not reassuring. Welcome to the Atchafalaya. We loaded gear for 30 minutes, Marianne's sample containers and analysis equipment, my emergency supplies and tools, 2 5-gallon jerry cans of fuel, water, food that'd keep in December heat. The boat sat lower in the water than I liked, but it'd manage if we didn't hit weather. The weather looked fine. Clear sky going pale blue, temperature already climbing towards 70. Perfect December morning in South Louisiana. The kind of day that made tourists think paradise and locals think hurricane season was getting closer. Marian climbed into the boat, immediately started organizing her equipment with that anal retentive precision that used to drive me crazy when we were married. Every item in its specific place, every container labeled and categorized. I just piled my gear in the bow and figured I'd find it when I needed it. "You're doing that on purpose," she said. "Doing what?" "Being deliberately disorganized to annoy me." "I'm being efficient." Big difference. I started the engine, listened to it catch smooth. Bobby did know his motors cracked bracket or not. "We need to hit Gator Point before the morning feed cycle. Mosquitoes are most active dawn and dusk." "I'm aware of Calicity circadian patterns. Thank you." We headed south through the main channel, passing camps that looked empty this time of year. Most recreational hunters had given up after the Park Service started the crackdown. Only people like me, people whose families were here before there were rules, still used the deep swamp. The water was high from fall rains, covering the cypress knees that usually marked the channel edges. High water meant easier navigation but less cover if we needed to hide from that veil. Trade-offs. Everything in the swamp was trade-offs. Tell me about Gator Point, Marian said. She had a notebook open, taking field observations even though we hadn't reached the site yet. Always working. I used to admire that. Then it became why we didn't talk anymore. Built in 1952 by my grandpère Etienne, 40 feet up in a live cypress. He wanted a place to watch wood ducks without them seeing him. I navigated around a deadfall, cut the engine to let momentum carry us through. Quiet was better in this section. Emma loved it. I took her up there when she was 8. She could see the whole basin from the platform. Did you notice any unusual equipment? I haven't been there in 2 years. Why not? Because the Park Service helicopter spotted me. Because I spent 3 hours chest deep in stagnant water hiding behind a deadfall while they searched. Because Emma's school called that afternoon to say she'd been in a fight and I missed it because I was running illegal traps. Timing never worked out, I said. She made a note in her book. That's what our marriage became toward the end. Her taking notes on all the ways I didn't measure up. Recording my failures like field data. The channel narrowed as we entered the protected zone, the area where the Park Service officially prohibited access. I knew the patrol patterns Tuesdays and Thursdays by helicopter, random boat patrols on weekends. Wednesday morning was usually clear. Usually, I kept watching the sky anyway. We passed through a grove of tupelo that had been standing when my grandfather was young. Massive trees with trunks wide as truck hoods, their bases flared out in the high water. This was old swamp, the kind that made you feel like you were trespassing even when your family had worked it for generations. There, Marian said, pointing. The cypress stood ahead, taller than its neighbors, with the platform visible as a dark square against the trunk. My grandfather's carpentry, weathered but still solid. The ladder rungs were cypress too, 43 of them spiraling up the trunk. And around the base, coating the water in a shimmer of wings, were mosquitoes. Not the veil we'd seen at Petit Lac, just a lot of them, more than normal. I cut the engine 30 yards out, let us drift. We'll need repellent, the strong stuff. I brought permethrin-treated netting. She was already pulling out what looked like beekeeping suits. These should provide adequate protection. Should. Nothing's certain in field research, Luke. We suited up, the netting hot and claustrophobic even in morning air. Marian handed me a respirator that smelled like rubber and gave me flashbacks to the time I had to spray bottom paint in Dad's shed without proper ventilation. Spent 3 days feeling like my lungs were coated in copper. If we're wearing this gear, I said, what's plan B if it fails? Swimming, very fast. I pulled us toward the cypress, using one of Grandpa's old push poles that I kept for shallow work. The mosquitoes rose in clouds as we approached, more of them than I'd realized. They hit the netting in waves, tiny impacts like rain on a tent. But they didn't bite through. The permethrin held. Tie off on the south side, Marian said, away from the concentration. I secured the boat to a cypress knee, triple-checked the knot. Losing the boat out here meant a 4-mile swim through gator habitat. Not technically fatal, but not a story I wanted to tell Bobby. The ladder rungs were slick with algae below the waterline, solid above it. I went first, testing each rung before putting my weight on it. The mosquitoes followed, a cloud of them spiraling up the trunk with us. Halfway up, I looked down. The boat looked smaller than it should. The water looked farther away, and the mosquitoes looked like they were organizing, forming patterns in the air. Don't stop, Marian called from below. They're exhibiting interest behavior. What's that mean? It means keep climbing. The platform came faster than I expected. I pulled myself over the edge, turned to help Marian up. She climbed like she did everything, efficiently, methodically, without wasted motion. The platform was 12 by 12, solid cypress planking that had held up better than it had any right to. And in the center, exactly where Emma's field note said, was equipment. Not scientific instruments, a drone. Specifically, a DJI Matt Rice with a modified payload bay and what looked like a custom camera rig. Commercial-grade equipment, the kind that cost more than my truck. And sitting next to it, in a waterproof case, was a laptop that woke up when Marian touched the keyboard. "Someone's been monitoring the swarm," she said, scrolling through files. "Luke, these are population density maps, breeding cycle projections, genetic sequencing data." "Who?" "University of Louisiana at Lafayette. Graduate research program in vector ecology." She opened another file and I saw photos. The veil, the massive mosquito swarm, photographed from above, from a drone. "Someone made this," I said, "on purpose. Maybe not made, maybe encouraged." She pointed to a file labeled Artificial Selection Protocol. They were breeding for specific traits: size, aggregation behavior, vector efficiency. Why? Because understanding how to enhance vector transmission helps you understand how to stop it. It's dual-use research. She looked at me, and I saw fear in her eyes again. "Luke, this is Department of Defense funding. Military biosecurity research." The platform creaked. I looked down, saw the boat was fine. Looked out at the swamp, saw morning light turning the water gold. Saw the veil rising from Petit Lac like a thunderhead forming. "We need to go," I said. "Now. I have to download these files." "Marianne." I grabbed her arm, pointed south. "Look." The veil was moving, not drifting on air currents, moving with purpose, flowing between cypress trunks like smoke that knew where it was going. Coming toward us. "How fast can you download?" I asked. 5 minutes if the satellite link holds." "You've got 2. She worked, fingers flying over the keyboard. I watched the veil advance, watched it split around trees, watched it flow over water like oil. It was maybe half a mile away, quarter mile, moving faster than wind should carry insects. "Luke." Marianne's voice was wrong, too quiet. "The research protocol. It wasn't just studying mosquitoes." "Marianne, we don't have time." They were studying vector-mediated behavioral modification, using the virus to alter host behavior, to make infected individuals. The veil was 200 yards out, close enough to see the individual insects forming the mass, close enough to hear the sound. Not buzzing, but something deeper, like a generator running. "Climb down," I said. "Now." She closed the laptop, stuffed it in her pack. We went down the ladder faster than safe, my hands slipping on rungs I'd climbed 100 times. The mosquitoes were everywhere now, not just around the cypress but filling the air like smoke. We hit the boat. I cut the tie line with the machete, yanked the engine to life. The Go Devil caught on the third pull, "Thank you, Bobby Thibodeau," and we accelerated away from the cypress, throwing spray that caught the morning light. Behind us, the veil reached the tree, covered the platform, covered the place where we'd been standing 30 seconds earlier. "They're hurting us," Marian shouted over the engine. "Luke, they're driving us toward the main channel." She was right. Every turn I tried to make, the veil shifted to block it. Not fast enough to catch us, the Go Devil could outrun them in open water, but fast enough to dictate direction. We were being pushed north, away from the deep swamp, away from Gaspard's Landing. I had a choice. Run for the main channel where we'd hit boat traffic, tourists, places where the Corps would see the veil and make their decision faster. Or cut west through the Narrows, risk the shallow channels where one wrong turn meant grounding the boat and facing that cloud on foot. "Hold on," I said, and cranked the wheel hard left. The boat skidded sideways, spray arcing over the bow. Bobby's cracked mounting bracket groaned but held. We shot into a channel barely wider than the boat, cypress knees on both sides close enough to scrape gel coat. The veil tried to follow. Couldn't. Too narrow. The cloud split, flowing around the channel mouth like water hitting a rock. "They're going around," Marian pointed. "They'll cut us off at the junction." The junction was 300 yards ahead, where this channel met the old logging cut. If the veil beat us there, we'd be trapped, surrounded, and I didn't want to find out what happened when that cloud decided to stop hurting and start feeding. "Engines at max," I shouted. "Can't push it harder without snapping the bracket." Marian looked at her equipment, looked at me, made a decision I saw in her eyes before she moved. She grabbed the drone case, threw it overboard. "What are you?" 40 pounds. She was already dumping sample containers. "We need speed more than evidence." The boat lifted, gained maybe 2 knots. The junction was 100 yards. 50. The veil was flowing through the trees on both sides, racing us. We hit the junction doing 30, too fast for the turn. I tried to compensate, felt the boat start to spin out, felt Bobby's bracket give way with a crack like a rifle shot. The engine mount snapped. The Godevil tilted, prop coming out of water, cavitating. We lost power instantly, momentum carrying us forward into the logging cut while the engine screamed and vibrated wrong. Behind us, the veil poured into the junction, filled it, kept coming. "Luke!" "I see it." I killed the engine before the bracket tore completely free, grabbed the push-pole. "Marianne, you ever pole a boat?" "No." "Learn fast. Grab the other pole. Push on the left bank, I'll take the right. We need to get to the old Gautreaux camp. Quarter-mile ahead." She grabbed the spare pole, started pushing. Wrong technique, she was using her arms instead of her legs. But we were moving, not fast. But the veil wasn't fast either, not in the confined space. It was patient, though, flowing after us like smoke that knew we'd tire eventually. My arms burned. The Gautreaux camp was close. I could see the pilings through the trees, but we were slowing. Marianne was gasping, her pole strokes getting shorter. "Almost there," I lied. "Keep pushing." "Luke, I can't." "Yes, you can. Emma needs her mother. Keep pushing." That got her. Gave her enough strength for 10 more strokes. 15. We reached the pilings as my legs started to shake. I tied off fast and messy, hauled Marian up the ladder. The Gautreaux camp was gone, destroyed in the flood 3 years back, but the platform remained. 8 feet square, high enough above water. We collapsed on the weathered planks, both of us breathing like we'd run a marathon. The veil reached the base of the pilings, stopped, didn't dissipate, didn't disperse, just waited, a living curtain of mosquitoes forming a wall between us and escape. "Why isn't it coming up?" Marian gasped. "I don't know. Maybe height limitation? Maybe..." I stopped, looked at the water around the pilings. "The current. It's running faster here. Maybe they can't maintain cohesion in moving water. Or maybe," Marian said slowly, "they're keeping us contained while they wait for something else." "What else?" She pulled out her phone, showed me the files she'd downloaded from the laptop. The research wasn't just about mosquitoes. It was about creating a complete vector host environment system. The mosquitoes are the vector. The virus modifies the host. And the environment is flooding. Luke. The core breaches the levee. This whole basin goes underwater. And the infected humans, the ones showing behavioral changes, they're all trying to return to the bayou. I understood then, saw the pattern. They'll flood it. The infected will enter the water, and the mosquitoes will feed on them in a target-rich environment. Amplify the virus. It's a feedback loop. The research was trying to create a self-sustaining epidemic system for biowarfare modeling. She looked at me, and I saw something break in her face, the scientist giving way to the terrified human. Luke, if the core floods the basin before we stop this, the whole Mississippi River system could be contaminated. Then we stop it. How? We're trapped on a platform with no boat, no engine, and a swarm of engineered mosquitoes waiting below. I looked around the platform, looked at what remained of the Gautreaux camp. Pilings, support beams, the old fuel tank still chained to the structure. The tank was empty, rusted through, but the chain was solid, and I had tools in my pack. Marianne, that laptop, can you access the drone controls? Remotely? Maybe if the drone's still functional. It is. I saw the indicator lights when you threw it. The case was waterproof. I dug through my pack, found my wire cutters and the roll of electrical tape I never left home without. How much battery life does the drone have? Depends on payload. Why? Because we're going to fly it upriver. Let the core see the veil from the air, see what they're dealing with. I started cutting the chain, measuring out 20 feet of links. If they understand this isn't just mosquitoes, maybe they'll delay the breach. And if they don't? Then we're no worse off than now. I looked at her. Can you get the drone airborne from here? She checked her phone, fingers moving across the screen. The signal's weak, but yes, I'm connected. Drone's 40 yards south, underwater but the case sealed. If I can trigger the emergency flotation. A hiss from below. The drone case surfaced, pneumatic bladders inflating. It drifted in the current, caught on a deadfall 10 yards from the platform. I need to retrieve it, Marian said. The veil is staying low. She stood, started stripping off the netting suit. I'll swim fast, be back in under a minute. Marianne, that's insane. So is everything else we've done today. She looked at me and I saw the woman I married. The one who drove to Biloxi through Hurricane Katrina because her research samples were in a freezer losing power. The one who testified before the state legislature about wetland restoration without notes because she knew every statute by heart. The one who jumped. She hit the water clean, swam hard for the deadfall. The veil shifted, contracted, but didn't pursue. Like Marian said, they were containing us, not killing us. Yet, she grabbed the case, turned back, made it halfway before the veil moved again. This time it didn't contract. It expanded, reached toward her like a hand closing. Marianne, dive! She went under, stayed down. The veil passed over the spot where she'd been, kept moving, searching. I counted seconds. 10, 15, 20. How long could she hold her breath? How long before? She surfaced at the pilings, gasping. I hauled her up, pulled the case up after her. We collapsed together on the platform, both breathing hard. Don't ever do that again, I said. Don't plan to. She opened the case, pulled out the drone. It was intact, camera housing sealed. Give me 5 minutes to get it powered up. While she worked, I finished the chain setup. Attached one end to the platform support beam, measured out the length. If this worked, if the veil rose to chase the drone, I'd drop the chain into the water, create an electrical ground. Then I'd use the jumper cables from my emergency kit to connect the battery to the chain and probably electrocute us both. But it was the only weapon we had. Ready, Marian said, bringing it up. The drone surfaced, motors whining. It lifted slowly, shedding water. The camera activated, and on Marianne's phone I saw the view from above. The platform, the veil surrounding us, the waterway beyond. And in the distance, coming up the channel, 2 boats, Corps of Engineers markings, heavy equipment on deck. They're early, Marian breathed. They're starting the breach early. Get the drone to them. Make them see. She flew it upriver, the camera transmitting. On screen, I watched the veil from above. Saw the pattern of it, the way it formed. Not random, not even coordinated. Choreographed. Luke, her voice was dead. The veil isn't containing us. It's protecting something. What? She zoomed the camera. Beneath the surface, just visible in the clear water, were structures. Pipes, holding tanks. A whole artificial system built into the cypress roots. It's a breeding facility, she said. The research didn't just study mosquitoes. They created a production system. The veil isn't a swarm. It's a colony, a superorganism. The drone reached the core boats. I saw men on deck looking up, saw one pointing. The camera captured it all, the veil, the facility, the scope of what we were facing. Then the screen went black. They shot it down, Marion said. They saw it as a threat. Or they saw it as evidence. I stood, looked at the veil below. It hadn't moved. Marianne, if this is a production facility, there's a control system. Shut-off valves, power supply, something that keeps it running. It's underwater. We can't. I can. I started stripping down to my jeans. I grew up diving these channels. I know how long I can hold my breath. Luke, that's suicide. So is sitting here waiting for the veil to figure out it can climb. So is letting the core breach the levee without knowing what they're releasing. I looked at her. So is letting whatever killed 43 people spread to Baton Rouge, where our daughter lives. That stopped her objections. Emma. Always Emma. The one thing we agreed on. What do I do? She asked. When I dive, you trigger the drone's emergency beacon. Flood it with signal. Maybe that'll distract the veil. Give me cover. I handed her my phone. If I'm not back in 3 minutes, call Bobby. Tell him where we are. He'll come get you. Luke. 3 minutes. Promise me. She nodded. I kissed her. Don't know why. Maybe because I might not get another chance. Maybe because she was the only person who ever understood why the swamp mattered to me. She kissed back, then pushed me toward the edge. 2 minutes, she said. I'm not waiting 3. Idove. The water was cold for December. 70 degrees feels warm in air but shocks when you're submerged. I went deep fast, following the pilings down to where they met the bottom, where the breeding facility's pipes emerged from the cypress roots like parasites. The veil didn't follow, couldn't maybe, or didn't want to leave its position protecting the facility. Above me, distorted through rippling water, I saw Marion trigger the beacon. Emergency lights strobed red and blue, the kind meant to attract rescue attention. The veil shifted, oriented toward the signal, gave me 30 seconds of invisibility I wouldn't get again. The pipes were PVC, modern construction, professional installation. Someone with resources built this, maintained it. I followed the main line to where it connected to a pump system, found the control box sealed in waterproof housing. 20 seconds down, lungs starting to burn. The box had a simple latch system. I popped it, found circuit boards and valves and a power supply running off what looked like solar cells mounted in the canopy above. Sophisticated setup. Probably ran automatically for months without maintenance. I started yanking wires. No elegance, no precision. Just destruction. My job, marine repair, fixing what breaks. Taught me how to break things efficiently. 30 seconds. 40. My vision starting to tunnel. The pump coughed, died. The pipes stopped humming. I felt vibration cease in the water around me. 50 seconds. I turned for the surface, kicked hard. The veil was descending. Coming for the beacon or coming for me, I couldn't tell. Didn't matter. I had maybe 10 feet to surface, and the cloud was dropping fast. My head broke water. I gasped, saw Marianne's face, saw her reaching. I grabbed the piling, pulled myself up the ladder while my legs felt like rubber. The veil reached the water surface, hovered there, waiting. Then it started to break apart. Not suddenly, not dramatically, just dispersing. Individual mosquitoes separating from the mass, flying away in small groups. The colony was dissolving, the superorganism dying because I'd killed its support system. We watched it fall apart for 5 minutes, 10. Watched the curtain become clouds, become nothing more than normal mosquito density. Bad, but survivable. "You did it," Marian said. Her voice was wrong, numb. "Luke, you actually did it." Did I? I looked at the water where the breeding facility lay. They'll rebuild. Whoever funded this research, they'll try again. Not if I expose them. She held up her phone. I've got the files, the research protocols, the DoD funding documents, everything. You'll destroy careers, maybe your own. I don't care. She looked at me, and I saw something I hadn't seen in years. Pride. This ends today. The research, the facility, the whole program. An engine sound upriver. Bobby's mud motor rig, coming fast. He'd heard the beacon somehow, or just had timing that bordered on supernatural. He pulled alongside the platform, took in our situation with one look. "You'll need a ride or a therapist, because I'm only qualified for one." "Ride," I said, "and maybe you didn't see anything unusual today." "Unusual? In the Atchafalaya?" Bobby grinned. "Never happens." We loaded into Bobby's boat. Marian protected her phone like it held nuclear codes. Maybe it did in a sense. Information was its own kind of weapon. "The core boats," I said. "They shot down the drone. That means they know something's here." "Good," Marian said. "Let them find the facility. Let them document it. More evidence for the investigation." "You really think you can stop this?" "I think I have to try." She looked at the swamp, the morning light turning everything golden. This is where Emma walked last spring, where she collected samples and wrote her observations. I won't let this place become a weapons testing ground. Bobby navigated us toward the main channel, taking the route that avoided the patrol zones. Professional courtesy among swamp rats. You don't ask where someone's been, they don't volunteer where they're going. My phone rang. Unknown number. I almost didn't answer, but something made me. "Mr. Gaspard?" A man's voice, official, military precise. "This is Colonel Marcus Trent, Army Corps of Engineers. I believe you've been interfering with federal operations." I looked at Marianne. She was listening, her face going pale. "I've been protecting my family's land," I said. "Your family's illegal camp on federal refuge, you mean?" Papers shuffling on his end. "Mr. Gaspard, we have a situation. A biological contamination that requires immediate flooding of the basin. I'm calling to inform you that you have 2 hours to evacuate before we breach the levee." 2 hours? You said 72. The situation has accelerated. We've identified a facility producing weaponized vectors. The only way to eliminate the threat is complete submersion of the affected area. Marian grabbed my phone. "Colonel, this is Dr. Marian Gaspard, CDC Vector-Borne Disease Division. Your flooding will spread contaminated water throughout the river system. You'll create a public health disaster. With respect, Doctor, we've consulted with our own medical advisors. The drowning protocol is the recommended response." "Recommended by who?" "The same people who created the facility." Silence. Then, "Doctor, I suggest you concern yourself with evacuation rather than policy. 2 hours. I'm sorry, but this is not negotiable." He ended the call. Marian looked at me, and I saw the weight settle on her. The understanding that we'd stopped the veil but not the flood. That we'd saved ourselves but not the swamp. "Gaspard's Landing," I said. My family's camp. It'll be underwater. I know. Luke, I'm sorry. Don't. I looked at Bobby. How fast can you get us to the landing? 40 minutes if I don't hit deadfalls. Make it 30. We reached Gaspard's Landing with 90 minutes before the breach. The camp sat on its stilts exactly as I'd left it. Weathered wood, patched roof, all my grandfather's craftsmanship about to be drowned for a second time in its history. First time was natural. This time was spite. I need to get the files uploaded, Marian said, already on her laptop. If I can get them to the right people before the breach. You'll stop nothing. I was pulling gear from the shed. Tools I couldn't replace. Dad's wrenches. Grandpa's hand-carved decoy ducks. The Corps already made their decision. Then we'll reverse it. Investigation. Congressional hearings. That takes months. We've got an hour and a half. She stopped typing, looked at me. What are you thinking? I'm thinking about the Bon Care spillway, 1927 flood. They had to dynamite the levee to save New Orleans. Took them 3 days to set up the charges properly. Corps doesn't do anything in 2 hours unless they already had the setup ready. Meaning they planned this breach before the outbreak, before the mosquitoes. They wanted to flood the basin anyway, and the contamination just gave them cover. I opened my safe, pulled out the documents I kept hidden. Land deeds, survey maps, my family's claim papers dating back to 1885. Papers that wouldn't matter underwater. There's something else, I said. The breeding facility. That wasn't recent construction. Those pipes had algae growth, sediment buildup. They'd been there years. Marianne's face changed, understanding dawning. The research started before the outbreak. Someone created the system, then triggered it deliberately. To justify flooding the basin, clear out the camps, the illegal settlements, all the people like me who won't leave because we've got nowhere else to go. I showed her the survey maps. Look at the land the Corps has been trying to acquire. It's all swamp access, all the best channels. Land they can't develop while it's populated. That's conspiracy theory, Luke. Is it? You got DoD funding documents in those files. Check who else was getting money. Check what else they were studying. She opened the files, started searching. I watched her face change as she found it. The connection. The paper trail showing the mosquito research was cover for land acquisition studies. Environmental remediation protocols that required complete flooding. They engineered a crisis, she whispered, created the outbreak to justify removing the human population. And 43 people died because we were in the way. I looked at the camp, at the swamp beyond. Marianne, I need to ask you something. What? That chain setup I made, the electrical ground, could it work on a larger scale? You want to electrify the entire basin? I want to make the flood dangerous enough they can't breach the levee without killing themselves. I pulled out the jerry cans of fuel, the electrical wire, every battery and power source in the camp. If we create a hazard, a real documented hazard, maybe they delay long enough for your investigation to matter. She stared at me. That's insane and illegal and probably won't work. But it might, and it's all I got. Marian closed her laptop, stood. Tell me what you need. We spent the next hour turning the swamp into a trap. Fuel spread on the water surface, not enough to ignite, but enough to make the water conductive when electrified. Battery packs wired in series, creating voltage that'd make the basin dangerous to enter. Trip wires and contact points that'd activate if the floodwaters rose. It was crude. It was desperate. Probably violated a dozen federal laws. It was home defense using the only tools I had. Luke, Bobby had stayed helping with the setup. Corps boats coming. 3 of them. They're early. How early? 30 minutes. I looked at Marianne. She was uploading files from her phone, trying to send everything to every contact she had before we lost signal. Desperate last-minute evidence distribution. The boats appeared around the bend. Military zodiacs, soldiers in hazmat suits, equipment that looked designed for demolition. They saw us, changed course, headed straight for the landing. Luke gasped, amplified voice through a bullhorn. "This is a restricted area. You are ordered to evacuate immediately." I stood at the end of the dock, my hands visible. Marianne beside me, Bobby behind us, ready to run if things went wrong. "This is my family's land," I called back. "I'm not leaving. You're interfering with federal disaster response. Step away from the structures." "Or what? You'll flood it anyway? You'll drown 100 years of my family's history because it's convenient." The lead boat pulled closer. An officer stepped forward, removed his helmet. Colonel Trent. I recognized him from his voice. "Mr. Gaspard, I understand you're angry." "Do you? You understand what it's like to be erased? To watch everything you know get buried because people with power decided you're expendable. This isn't about you. It's about public safety. It's about land acquisition. And you know it." I gestured to Marianne. "Dr. Gaspard has evidence. Documents showing the mosquito research was cover for removing the human population from the basin." Trent looked at Marianne. Something passed between them, recognition maybe, or threat assessment. "Doctor, whatever you think you've found." "I found DoD funding for dual-use research. I found breeding facilities designed to create public health crises. And I found your name, Colonel, on procurement orders for demolition equipment dated 6 months before the outbreak." She held up her phone. "I've already sent these files to the CDC, the EPA, and 3 congressional oversight committees." Trent's expression didn't change. "Even if your allegations were true, the contamination is real. People are dying. We have to act. Then act surgically. Target the breeding facility, not the entire basin." "We don't have time." "You have time because you've always had time. This breach was planned. The crisis was engineered." Marianne stepped forward, and I saw the woman who testified without notes. "And if you proceed, Colonel, every death becomes a federal crime. Biowarfare testing on domestic soil, criminal negligence, conspiracy to commit genocide against a protected class of citizens." Protected class. That got his attention. "These camps are illegal. The people in them aren't. They're American citizens with rights. And flooding them out using an engineered crisis makes you culpable." She looked at me, then back to Trent. "But there's another option." "What option?" "You delay the breach for 72 hours. We expose the breeding facility, document the research program, eliminate the threat without destroying the basin. You get credit for the response. We get justice for the victims." She paused. "And the Corps avoids being prosecuted for crimes against humanity." Trent looked at his soldiers, at his equipment at the camp behind us, calculating, weighing, trying to decide if drowning us was worth the political fallout. 72 hours, he said finally. "But doctor, if the contamination spreads beyond the basin, if one more person dies from this outbreak, then you breach the levee and we accept responsibility." Marianne looked at me. "Right, Luke?" I thought about the camp, about grandpa's carpentry and dad's workshop and all the repairs I'd made trying to hold history together. Thought about Emma walking these channels, collecting data, seeing the swamp the way I saw it. 72 hours, I agreed. Trent nodded. His boats pulled away, heading back upriver. We watched them go in silence. "Did we just lie to a federal officer?" Bobby asked. "Because I'd like to know before I'm an accessory." "We bought time," Marianne said. "What we do with it determines if it was a lie." She was already back on her laptop, coordinating, calling contacts at universities, research centers, media outlets, building the case against the program that created the outbreak. I sat on the dock and watched the sunset turn the water gold. This time of day, the swamp looked peaceful, looked like home should look. But I could still feel pressure building, the sense of something waiting. The Corps might delay, but the flood was still coming. One way or another, water always won. Luke, Marion sat beside me. If we stop this, if we expose the program and save the basin, what then? Then I fix the dock, repair the camp, keep living. Here, alone, it's where I belong. She was quiet for a long time. Then, Emma asked about you yesterday, asked if you'd teach her to pole a boat properly. She said she tried on her field trip and couldn't get the technique right. She was here without me. She'd like to come back with you, if there's still a camp to come back to. I looked at Marianne, saw something in her face I hadn't seen since before the divorce. Not love exactly, but possibility. 72 hours, I said. Then we'll see. The sun dropped below the cypress line. Night came to the bayou, bringing its usual sounds. Frogs, night birds, water moving through channels. No mosquitoes. The veil was gone. The superorganism dissolved. But I knew better than to trust calm. The swamp always had secrets, and some of them didn't die when you wanted them to. Behind us, in the camp, Marion worked through the night, building her case, fighting her war with documents and evidence and the kind of determination that stopped hurricanes through sheer will. I sat on the dock and kept watch, over the water, over home, over the place where my family lived for generations, where maybe they'd live for generations more. If the water didn't rise, if the Corps kept their word, if the swamp decided to let us stay. Emergency alert update. Atchafalaya Basin levee breach postponed. Specialized containment operations underway. Residents advised to shelter in place pending further assessment. Federal investigation initiated into vector research protocols. The alert came through on my phone at 3 a.m. Marion saw it too, looked at me with exhausted triumph. We did it, she said. For now, I corrected. Because the swamp taught me young, nothing stays saved. You just fight for another day, another season, another generation. And maybe, if you're lucky and stubborn and willing to stand on docks watching darkness, you hold on to what matters. Grandpère would have understood. So I think would Emma.